Hello again. I wonder if any viewers would care to guess what country the pictures in the thumbnails to this video were taken. Surprisingly, the answer is Afghanistan in the mid-1970s. It was at that time a liberal and easy-going place. Muslim, yes, but only in the way that Britain is Christian. It was much the same as Iran at that time, which was also a liberal and relaxed sort of place, a close ally of both Israel and the United States. Turkey was the same. Muslim in name, but increasingly secular and non-religious, especially in the big cities, which was obviously a legacy of Kemal Ataturk's. Kemalism was the main philosophy in the country in the 1970s. There was no animosity in general to the West in those Muslim countries, and all three of them wished to become closer to the West and looked to America as their example of an ideal society. The current confrontation between the West and militant Islam simply did not exist. Even in the Middle East, the confrontation between Israel and the Fedayeen was purely nationalist in character, and there wasn't any religious conflict at all. Muslims lived happily with Christians. Bethlehem was an open city, and groups like Hezbollah and Hamas simply did not exist. It's true that in Egypt there was a Muslim Brotherhood, but they were a fringe group of no real significance. What upset the apple cart, of course, was the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. He ran quite a tight ship and was pushing his country ever faster along the road to becoming a Western place where Islam had little influence. He rode roughshod over those who didn't really agree with his views and wanted him to slow down. And he didn't really have much time for communists and left-wing people because he thought they were agents of the Soviet Union trying to destabilise his regime, about which they were probably right. There was a lot of left-wing opposition to the Shah, and America and Britain supplied all sorts of stuff to the regime and held the Shah's coat while he bashed up the opposition because they were worried that otherwise the country might fall to the Soviets. I'm sure we all remember the domino theory that was so popular in the 1970s during the Cold War. Ultimately, the Shah was forced to flee, and it was Muslim extremists who were quickest after that to seize power when Ayatollah Khomeini returned to the country and declared it to be an Islamic republic. This was a really big problem for the rest of the Muslim world because, of course, these people were Shiites. I won't go too deeply into this other than saying that the Sunnis and Shiites split within, well, a few years of the Prophet's death. The Sunnis managed to get Abu Bakr to be the first caliph, and the Shiites thought it should have been the Prophet's grandson, and that problem has continued ever since. The difficulty is that once a radical Shiite movement had taken power in Iran, the Iranians thought that this might mean that they could become the centre of gravity of the Muslim world, a possibility that the Saudis, of course, viewed with absolute horror, they being fundamentalist Sunnis, the Wahhabis. This all started a chain reaction among Sunni groups, and when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan shortly after the Iranian Revolution, the Saudis were very swift to make sure that resistance to the occupation there was spearheaded by Sunnis. Think Osama bin Laden, a Saudi in Afghanistan, and you'll get the idea. It is this process that we in the West have seen causing so much trouble. And when we see that both Iran and Afghanistan have changed from progressive and sophisticated countries which shared our values into medieval theocracies, we think that this is what Islam actually means. It's rather as if we watched the Spanish Inquisition at work and then decided that we could judge our local vicar because he was part of the same movement. Technically true, but in practice not really. The echoes of this struggle set off by the Iranian Revolution have engulfed the Muslim world and in particular, of course, the Arab world. You will not understand what happened in Syria and Iraq and the whole business of ISIS and so on unless you study the conflict between the Shiites and the Sunnis. It affects everything and has dragged Muslims back towards a really primitive interpretation of their religion. You see it happening now with Erdogan in Turkey, and you see it going on in Israel too. Everywhere, militant and intolerant Islam is rearing its head. Almost 50 years ago, I was able to visit places like the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem and go inside quite freely. Now, as a kuffar, I would be forbidden. That is the way that things have changed. Whether we shall ever see women in Afghanistan dressing once more like the ones in the thumbnail is an interesting point. We in the West share part of the blame, of course, because it was we who saw the Shah of Iran as a bulwark against the Soviet Union and so helped him to suppress communist opposition in his country. Had we been a little more clever, we might have encouraged him to compromise rather than adopt the intransigent attitude which triggered the revolution in 1979. To that extent, the West shares some responsibility for the resurgence of militant Islam in the world today.